Oh, what is going on, guys? Hockey Guy 1 here. Welcome to my ranking of every single movie that I saw in the year 2019. So starting off at number 38, I got Arctic Dogs. I'm still asking myself why I even watched this movie. There's pretty much no reason for me to do it. It's just that I basically just wanted to see how bad it was, and boy, did it pay off. This movie is honestly one of the worst animated movies I've ever seen. And it's up there with like Norm of the North and Emoji Movie. It's that bad. The story is pretty much basic. They don't really do anything special, and they barely do anything that makes it consistent. Our main character is pretty much just that it wants to be on the top of all the dogs and be up there with them. It just is a completely bland, rewritten main protagonist. It's just pretty much just like a normal protagonist. It's been written many times, and they end up just doing this. And even all the voice actors, like Jeremy Renner, and they all like had big paychecks, obviously, and it definitely seemed like they were just there for the paycheck. They didn't sound like they wanted to be there when saying their lines. They all just sounded like they wanted to get the hell out of this movie as fast as they can. Coming at number 37, I got Ugly Dolls. I'm still wondering why I watched this movie. I watched it for an obvious reason. Yes, I'm referring to you, Jaden. And it's just that this movie is just really bad. I was like so tempted to like turn this off when I was watching this online the other day. And it's just so hard to sit there because it's literally like this movie's kind of like set in as a musical with all the songs in it, and all the songs just feel really bad, and because the way that they are sung are just terrible. That's just something that's really insufferable about this movie is the singing in this movie, and it's just giving me kind of a headache. And there's just this movie story is just inconsistent. It kind of starts out kind of going with these guys. He's kind of like looking through it and finding this new world, and then trying to it's really inconsistent. It doesn't really make that much sense. It's all over the place, and that's something that doesn't really help this movie out very much. Is that the pacing is just super bad, and it just feels like this movie goes on forever, and this is really not that long of a movie, because the pacing in this movie is just very slow-paced, and it just makes the movie a lot more of a bore. And then all of our main characters is very much nothing much to them, if I'm being honest with you. Coming at number 36, I got Hellboy 2019. And this movie is supposed to be about this whole Avenger try and stop the Black Queen, and it's just feels like kind of a bore. There's nothing much to the story. It's pretty much just completely bland. It's all just save the world from evil in a lot of it, and it's just that it feels very bland. Especially what doesn't help is the pacing. It feels like this movie just never really ends because the pacing it's so slow and makes the movie feel much longer than it is already, and it's kind of as a bummer to sit through. And for a low budget movie, this movie doesn't really have that bad of CGI. Even David Harbour's didn't do bad, but like overall, this movie just really fails on mostly every single department. To be honest, the cinematography, their camera angles that didn't work. They did a close-up when they didn't really need to, and then there are multiple scenes where they use a wide out in a scene where they should have used a close-up. It's kind of ridiculous that a movie can use that bad of cinematography. And then the lighting in this movie, there are many scenes where you can barely see what was really going on, and then it's just that the characters that, like Hellboy, he just doesn't grow very well. They just kind of add in multiple things to them that, like, his whole father thing that doesn't really need to. And to be honest, this movie does have a lack of memorability, if I'm being honest with you. It just really fails on nearly every single department that it just that it's one of the worst, which is why it's definitely one of the worst movies of the year. At number 35, I got Child's Play 2019. Obviously, it's supposed to be like a whole remake of the original Child's Play movie from like 1989, and this movie pretty much fails in nearly every way to try and be a good horror movie. I mean, Mark Hamill did a pretty good job, and there's kind of like one good kill, but other than that, this movie like pretty much failed. I mean, whenever it tries to be scary, it tries to use jump scares, and it's just completely failed. And then there are a bunch of kills in this movie that just don't work besides one, and it just doesn't really feel like it. And then there's like the whole story to this movie that just kind of doesn't really make that much sense. I mean, it's a buddy, and it's just that, and just like the whole reason that Sharky like goes crazy just doesn't even make him feel scary. He just goes crazy because he wants to protect Annie, which doesn't really make him a scary slasher villain. I mean, if he just went crazy because he was meant that, it would have made more sense. But they just kind of like make it so he feels kind of sympathetic for it. I mean, it doesn't work for a horror villain, in my opinion. I mean, it's just nearly failed in every department. I mean, Andy as well, just him as the whole main protagonist just is not good. I mean, he barely really grows in this movie, and he just feels like he's pretty bland, if I'm being honest. There's like nothing much to him, if I'm being honest. And just about every single character in this movie is just really bad. I mean, there's just nothing to this movie, and just whole visual effects to this is bad. I mean, and overall, the movie does kind of like fail in so many departments that it just is insufferable to sit through. At number 34, I got Dark Phoenix. Believe it or not, I was one of the only people who probably were excited for this movie, and to be honest, this movie did not live up to expectations. It was by far like the most disappointing movie I saw all year. I mean, this movie is just a really bad movie. I mean, there are good elements like acting, and then, I mean, that didn't work, but there are a lot of elements in this movie that really does fail. I mean, the whole story to this is supposed to be Dark Phoenix Saga, and I feel like they really butchered the Dark Phoenix Saga for like the second time. I mean, it's just like a whole story to try and make Jean great. You get all evil and turn into this Dark Phoenix, and I really feel like they needed to do more to express the Dark Phoenix powers. I mean, we didn't really know much about the Dark Phoenix powers, and they just randomly gave them to her. It doesn't really seem like she's that powerful. It doesn't really work very much in this movie, and just the whole how she got redeemed kind of doesn't really work. And then the whole villain Vok, I mean, nothing to her. She's just a normal manipulative villain that doesn't really do much. She just doesn't really work for this movie, as it's just that she doesn't really feel intimidating, and this doesn't really work that well. Then the whole CGI of this movie just really fails. The whole idea, the way they killed off Mystique, is just kind of stupid in my opinion. I mean, I feel like they needed like a much better send-off for a character like that. And it's just that it really fails in this, and it's pretty much a terrible way to end off those are pretty good franchises in the X-Men franchise. Number 33, I got Dumbo 2019. This movie is obviously a remake of the original Dumbo, and it just really doesn't have the feel that, I mean, they tried something different, obviously, which I guess I could have given them credit for trying something different, but this whole different kind of story is badly executed, if I'm being honest. I mean, this whole new story pretty much just has this Dumbo going to a circus. I mean, it just kind of has a darker tone, which I don't feel like makes sense for this kind of story. I mean, it just doesn't really work for it that well. Just kind of bringing in all these circus owners, and it just made the movie more boring. This kind of didn't add much to the story, and it's just that I feel like they did a bad job kind of developing Dumbo, and he's not really sweet or anything, and these kids that help him out just aren't really done much. I mean, they're pretty much bad characters, if I'm being honest, and And then, I guess you could say the CGI is realistic, which is something I do appreciate with this movie. It's that they do a good job kind of like keeping it realistic, but around it's just that this movie fails to create a story that kind of gets me into it, and it's that it doesn't really have kind of a feel of a Disney movie. I mean, it just kind of feels like it's just that they failed in this, and it's the whole pacing of this movie just makes it feel like it never ends, and it's just that the characters, they fail, and then the cinematography in this, and again, they kind of try that thing, they have a camera really far away from the action, but it doesn't really capture much of the scene, which is why I don't really like it that much, and overall, this movie just fails on so many departments to even come close to the original. Coming in number 32, I got The Angry Birds Movie 2. This movie, I just couldn't sit through this. I mean, the animation of this movie, absolutely gorgeous. And just some of the voice acting is fine, but overall, this movie just, it really fails. I mean, the whole story doesn't really feel like it's, it's just kind of like this whole adventure and finding out this new Eagle Island, which I don't really get. It's a whole plot moment, and it doesn't really make that much sense, by being honest. And then kind of the Mighty Eagle have like a big connection to these eagles. Just it feels like that was just unneeded, if I'm being honest. And just the jokes in this movie, it's just, they just feel so childish. I mean, they really just feel like they're intended for kids, and which is something I don't really. I mean, I wish they I'm okay. Have the kids have fun, but at least balance it out with some other jokes that they wouldn't get, that older people who are forced to watch it can get. I mean, it's just that it doesn't really work. I mean, they use a baby shark joke in this movie. That should just tell you how bad of jokes this is. I mean, a baby shark song is already just as bad as it is, but having it as a joke in this movie just really doesn't even make sense. It's really just, the bomb was supposed to distract these eagles, so they start using a baby shark song. It doesn't even make remotely any sense for the story, and it's just a joke that felt like a pop culture reference that's just no one's gonna really get in like 5 years. Number 31, I got Men in Black International. I would call myself disappointed in this movie, but that would mean I had any expectations for it, if I'm being honest. I mean, this movie just doesn't really have a consistent story. They really do fail to develop their main characters of this movie, and it's just that the whole CGI and the aliens just looks ridiculous. I mean, they make the eyes just ridiculously big, which just makes it look fake, and it's kind of creepy, if I'm being honest. I mean, Tessa Thompson in this movie, she looked like she wanted to get out of here, and she just looked completely unconfident when delivering her lines, and just looked like she didn't really need to be in this movie that much. It's just that they needed kind of a better casting choice for this, if I'm being honest. And this movie just, it fails so much in every department. I mean, cinematography, lighting, pretty much any element of this movie that's very much important, very much fails. I mean, there are some things that work. I mean, there's Hemsworth didn't do bad. There are multiple things about this movie that do work, but there are overall too many things that don't work, and it just made the movie really bad and hard to sit through. Number 30, I got Aladdin 2019. This movie was just really bad. I mean, first I'm gonna go with some things that I kind of liked about it. I mean, there's certain songs that I liked about it. I mean, A Whole New World wasn't bad, and there are other songs, like One Jump Ahead, I feel like they kind of improved upon that. And then some of the acting, like Men Among Us and How You Almost Got Were fine. I mean, they felt like they had chemistry with each other and did a pretty good job for the most part. And I do kind of like the whole kind of looks of the whole place. And it's just that this movie does really fail. Like, the CGI in this movie is absolutely atrocious. I mean, of course, there's the genie, the looks of the genie is just it looks so bad. I mean, is it just a gigantic Will Smith with blue on it? I mean, there's nothing else to it. I mean, that's pretty much all it is, and it just looks so fake, and it's so obvious that it's CGI'd. I mean, and it just does not work for it, and it's just that it really looks kind of weird in this movie, if I'm being honest. And this whole climax just felt really underwhelming. I mean, it's just like a whole red carpet race, and then there was an even worse looking Jafar genie comes in, and obviously that's the ending of the movie, same as the original. And it's just that it felt underwhelming, if I'm being honest. I mean, the changes of that didn't really work, and a lot of the changes to the stories really felt kind of underwhelming, if I'm being honest, and more that the movie just kind of failed. I mean, the pacing is even worse because they unnecessarily made it longer, and just there are a couple of songs that like genie sings, like Friend Like Me and Prince Holly. I mean, Will Smith did a terrible job with his singing, and it's just so obviously auto-tuned in those two songs. It's just, it was hard to listen to those songs because those singing of Will Smith was just really, really bad. It's just like the whole reason why I felt like he did a pretty bad job with his performance. I mean, he didn't really feel like the character that much, and it's just that it just really didn't work for me. At number 29, I got How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. This movie, honestly, is the most overrated movie of the year. I'm honestly tied of all time with its two predecessors. I mean, it's just that this movie just feels like it doesn't really work. I mean, the story is just completely bland. I mean, it's pretty much just a whole journey and trying to run away from Grimmel. I mean, it doesn't really feel that different. Grimmel doesn't even feel that different from Drago. He doesn't really have a whole reason to want to kill out the Night Furies. He's kind of like him. It's just kind of what makes him feel like a really bad villain. I mean, there's just he's a really bad villain in that kind of case, because it's just that he doesn't feel any different from Drago, and that he doesn't really have a reason to do anything, doesn't really have a motivation. I mean, it just kind of keeps him unintimidating, and they don't really do anything that makes him intimidating. And this movie's jokes, like the whole rough nut scene, just unfunny. I mean, doesn't really work. It's just rough nut being annoying. That's about it. And honestly, the ending of this movie, I mean, while it does hit a lot of fans, it did not hit me as someone who did not like the trilogy. And I honestly felt like it just felt unsatisfying, if I'm being honest, because these characters didn't really develop much throughout the franchise. It just felt like the same characters as they were in the original, and then Hiccup and Astra gets married, despite the fact that they do basically nothing with that love story throughout the trilogy, that it really feels like they didn't really do not enough to like make it so it feels earned. I mean, it just, this movie fails so many times, even with this movie's good-looking animation and somewhat decent job with the and a somewhat decent job with the voice acting, it still fails to create a story that's not cliched and the characters that actually develop. Number 28, I got Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. This movie is just really bad. I mean, I don't feel like there was any reason for this movie to exist. I mean, there's no reason for a sequel to Maleficent. It just feels like this movie is something needed, if I'm being honest. I mean, the whole story is supposed to be, with Maleficent kind of being misunderstood still after saving Aurora. I mean, she's still kind of misunderstood, which doesn't even make sense because of the ending of the last movie. And the whole kind of fight with that one queen, again, is another bad villain for these movies. And it's just that this movie really does fail. I mean, it's that story is just really bad. And then the characters, like Maleficent, she didn't really do much. which in this movie, I mean, she did obviously do a lot, but it doesn't really feel satisfying the way she does it. I mean, kind of like showing us she's a fairy more. It doesn't really make sense. Aurora, her relationship with Prince Philip, again, feels unearned. I mean, they literally just met each other last movie, and in this movie, they're like, oh, we need to get married. Which, in my opinion, it's not the way you really write a love story. I mean, it's just really bad, in my opinion, to write something like that. And it's just that the movie does have good acting, I'll give it that, but overall, this movie does really fail, if I'm being obvious. I mean, cinematography is okay, but the visual effects, I do feel like, are a bit overused at times, and it's just that overall, this movie fails to make it so it really feels like it exists. It should exist. If I'm being honest, they didn't feel like there was much more to tell, and it just felt like they're just making this exist just to have a sequel to it, just because pretty much they wanted it for some reason. Number 27, I got The Secret Life of Pets 2. This movie is pretty much the definition of mediocrity. I mean, there's some good elements to this in the animation. I mean, of course, very much like all Illumination's animation, which I do really like Illumination's style of animation, so I feel like it works. But overall, the story just has too many subplots on top of each other, and it just overall makes it a mess, and also kind of really affects pacing. And even with us trying to be character-driven in it, their overall doesn't even work because of the amount of subplots they put on top of it, and it just made the movie really feel way too long, and there are some characters that aren't very good, and overall this movie's pretty much mediocrity because they tried too many subplots on top of each other, and it just ended up not working in the end. Number 26, I got Godzilla, King of the Monsters. This movie, again, is pretty much mediocrity defined. I mean, it has good action and good, kind of like decent looking visuals, but overall, it's just that this movie's story just feels very bland. It's not really consistent. There's not really much of a story, if I'm being honest. And then all the human characters just barely develop and really just don't really feel like main characters that much. I mean, they just feel like they're really playing in this movie, and overall just don't really work very well. I mean, it's just that you don't really feel anything because this whole relationship is, and they don't really treat their kid well, and it really fails in that way. And this movie overall just really doesn't do a good job with its characters and story, and it really seemed like they were just focusing on action and visuals. I mean, even in cinematography, I mean, it was okay. I mean, times kind of were, but lighting, yeah, they didn't really do a good job with that. But yeah, it just seemed like I said, it just seemed like they just cared more about visuals and action rather than creating a consistent story with good characters. Number 25, I got Terminator Dark Fate. This movie, again, is pretty mediocre. I mean, it's very underwhelming to watch. I mean, the story just doesn't really feel like it does anything new to this franchise. It doesn't really work. And then the whole idea of killing off John Connor to like make it here, and it just doesn't work in my opinion. It just doesn't even make that much sense, to be honest. I mean, the whole idea of it was stupid to begin with. I mean, it's just that, and just then the whole machine T-100 thing hit Baby Arnold, of course, then he just doesn't really feel like he does anything in this movie. I mean, it's kind of like grown up to be a father. I mean, they did a decent job with that, but overall, it just feels like it doesn't really work for the story, if I'm being honest. And it just that this movie does do a good job with action, but does really fail to create an original story. Number 24, I got The Kid Who Would Be King. This movie was okay to average at best. I mean, there are some good elements to it, and there are some bad elements. I mean, but I do kind of like the whole idea of this new kind of team, or third kind of story. I mean, it takes place in, like, in, like, the future, and I think they did a pretty good job with it, and it's okay. I mean, there are elements that, like, really fail. I mean, I didn't really like the whole idea of, like, Merlin and everything. I mean, just, like, all these high characters that don't really feel very good, and there's kind of, like, some lighting that doesn't really feel like it's weird, and the whole villains of this movie pretty bad, if I'm being honest, and it's that they feel like good job kind of creating a new kind of King Arthur kind of story, and Alex I kind of like do a good job in developing it. And there are elements in this movie that do feel like lighting at times can be really bad, and then cinematography is like okay, and times it can be good, times it can be bad, and it's just overall just kind of an okay movie. Number 23, I got The Lion King 2019, which this movie was average, but I'm being honest. I mean, the visual effects I do really praise. I mean, I'm glad they made it look very realistic, and you can feel like real lions. I mean, I like that whole idea, even if they're not really showing emotion. I don't really care about that much. Voice acting pretty good for like most parts, and like James Earl Jones is kind of like the only one that did bad in my opinion. I mean, showing a legend for I mean, him and Scar just felt really intimidating, and it's that his whole delivery is just really intimidating, and it's that it really works for us, in my opinion. I mean, it's just the way he delivers the lines really helps out, and they don't like the like 2 new scenes they added were like okay in my opinion. I mean, and it just kind of like add on, kind of fits in, and then just no, it's kind of okay. It kind of like router kind of, which is kind of like what I like. But overall, where this movie does kind of fail is that for the most part, this story is pretty much the exact same as the original, which is something that makes this movie kind of fail, and it's just kind of like stops it from being a good movie. It's just that they did the exact same thing as the original, pretty much, and it's that it doesn't really work. There are even sometimes when there's humor that didn't really work in this movie. Yeah, they kind of changed, and it overall doesn't work well. But overall, this movie was okay despite its flaws. Number 22, I got Captain Marvel. I mean, this movie is pretty good. I mean, I didn't really dislike the movie. I mean, I liked the I kind of enjoy it. I mean, it does have its flaws, no doubt about it. I mean, in this movie, it does kind of have, like, the whole visual effects, because in this movie, it just kind of look fake. I mean, especially, like, with Captain Marvel's powers, I mean, it doesn't really look good. And then, it's just Brie Larson that did okay. I mean, I don't really think she did that bad, but there are definitely some scenes she didn't do the best in, and others she did better in. I mean, she did an okay job in this movie, and in this movie's action is definitely very CGI heavy, which does kind of work. And times I kind of like the action, however, CGI can be overused. I do like the whole idea of making Captain Marvel a comic book accurate costume. It's just that this movie could feel kind of underwhelming sometimes, as there are elements of the story that don't really work, and then the whole kind of Kree villains that just don't really work for me, and then kind of bringing in Ronan in this movie doesn't really make story sense in my opinion. Number 21, I got Abominable. This movie was honestly kind of surprising. I mean, they did a pretty good job with the whole trying to bring Everest back to Mount Everest kind of part of the story, and the animation does look pretty good. I mean, I like the whole looks of character designs and the background, and then they do a pretty good job with them, I'd say, and as well as each character. I mean, the whole elements of her, just how she likes being alone, kind of just how you really get along with her family, and I feel like they do a good job in developing her relationship with Everest. However, there are some characters I don't really like this, like the comic release. Just kind of feel like they don't really work. I mean, whenever they put out a joke, it's unfunny. And just the times when they try and connect the whole villain plot, the main story doesn't really fit in very well. And it's that Deus Ex Machina is kind of used to like solve it, which I don't really like. The idea of trying to use Deus Ex Machina to try and solve a plot, in my opinion, just makes it feel kind of cliched. For 20, I got Pokemon Detective Pikachu. This movie does work in areas. I mean, it's a very good movie for what it is. I mean, and they do a pretty good job with Pikachu himself. Like, however, it's like the whole review revealed that like he's kind of like Justin's characters. That just, in my opinion, that was a stupid plot twist. It doesn't really make that much sense. However, I do think they do a pretty good job with Pikachu. Other than that, I mean, and the whole CGI of this movie, it looks pretty convincing. I mean, they do a good job with it. I mean, despite this movie was like the whole main villain kind of controlling Mewtwo, it just doesn't really work for me, and it just really fails in my opinion. And it's just that part of it doesn't really work. However, I think overall they do a pretty good job with the story with it, but despite its flaws. But overall, I just like this movie. It does have its flaws. Number 19, I got Missing Link. This movie is again a pretty good movie. I mean, in their elements, it doesn't really work to me. Like the villains and just pretty much the whole kind of thing. It's right. It's like the whole thing, like when it kind of got to like the climax, it's like all kind of anything doesn't really work. But like I like the whole quest to find the Sasquatch and bring back. However, it does kind of like feel kind of inconsistent at times. I do like that whole idea to try and improve that the Sasquatch kind of exists. And I do think it did a pretty good job with kind of elements of the story, and they did do a very good job with it, and they did movie as well. Just like the whole claymation animation does look very good, and I do really like this movie overall, despite its issues. Number 18, I got Ad Astra. This movie just it feels like it can go on for too long sometimes, but it is overall a good movie despite pacing problems. A couple story and structure problems here and there, as well as character problems, but overall, I do feel like they did a pretty good job with that Astra here. I mean, I do feel like this movie is a pretty good job. They had like the whole idea, like going there in space and everything. And how at high this story can feel kind of inconsistent, but I do think they overall did a pretty good job with it. Like the acting is very good, and the cinematography and visuals, they all look really good, and it's stuff that like makes this movie really enjoyable to watch, despite the fact that it does have a bunch of pacing problems. Number 17, I got Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. This movie, again, like I've been saying since like I've seen it, I mean, there are elements of the story that I like the whole kind of like adventure or try to find this whole plan kind of like, but however, I do not like the way they brought back Emperor Palpatine. It just was completely stupid in my opinion. I mean, they could have found out any other better way, if I'm being honest, but this way they did it here is completely blind, if I'm being honest. I mean, it didn't really work, and I just don't really like the way that Palpatine and Lando were kind of executed, and just kind of felt like more just kind of, fan service, to be honest. But I do really like elements of the movie, like the action in this I felt was very engaging. Kylo Ren, I felt like they did a good job with his character, and kind of like including Rey with all these Jedi, I feel like they did a good job with that. But overall, obviously, this movie does fail in some departments, like I mentioned. Number 16, I got Glass. This movie, honestly, is kind of an underrated movie. I mean, to be honest, it's not really known by many people, if I'm being honest. I mean, I felt I feel like the entire trilogy is kind of underrated because like, they don't really get talked about that much. Which, however, this movie did kind of like get a bit of backlash when it came out. I mean, it's obviously like a very divisive movie, but I'm kind of like on the positive side despite the issues I had with this movie. I mean, this movie does a pretty good job with the story, despite the fact that pacing can be a bit off in the second act. But overall, I just felt like the third act of this movie was just pretty bad. I mean, I didn't mind like the whole fight between enemies and the stuff and the overseer. Like, I didn't really mind that part of it. But however, what I don't like is the way that the ending of this movie. I mean, the ending of this movie I did not like it. I mean, I did not agree with the way they killed Olaf, David Dunn, or almost any of the three characters. I felt like they did a pretty bad job with that. I mean, just him dying, and I feel like that's a bad way to sum him up. Just keep splashing his head in water and in eyes, and then it's a really bad way to send off such a good character. But obviously, in this movie, like I mentioned, they do a pretty good job with the story, but and as well as characters. However, as well as James McAvoy and Samuel Jackson, Bruce Willis, and the acting is good. However, this movie does have a bad ending to this movie, and it's just more of like a good movie, bad ending kind of movie. For 15, I got Alita: Battle Angel. This movie is honestly probably one of the most underrated movies of the year, if not the most underrated. I mean, it's not really widely talked about that much, and I do feel like it is super underrated. I mean, it's just that this movie, I feel like it's a really good movie. I mean, the whole story of it is really good. A very good job with like the whole story and keeping it kind of consistent and keeping you engaging. And also kind of goes to pacing, which they do a pretty good job with them. Just that Lita as a whole character was done pretty well. And then it does have its flaws, obviously. I mean, whole villain, like, Richard kind of thing. I don't feel like it was pretty good. And just that this movie does kind of feel a bit inconsistent at times. But overall, I do feel like the story is done well. And it just feels like a really fun movie. 14, I got Hobbs and Shaw. This movie is just a very fun movie. I mean, just the whole action this is just really good. I feel like they did a good job with it. I mean, the story is very consistent. Just like these two guys teaming up to try to take down this one guy who's like stealing. I mean, it's a very good action movie that I like to see. Just the whole villain in this movie is done pretty well for the most part. Idris Elba. Very intimidating, this movie, like the whole way is delivering. And then, of course, Dwayne Johnson and Jason Statham both did a pretty good job. And this whole movie is just really hilarious. Like, when this movie puts out a joke, it really works. I mean, it can be hilarious at times, if I'm being honest. I mean, there are a couple of jokes that don't really work, but there are definitely jokes that do hit. And I do feel like they do overall a pretty good job with the jokes in this movie, and it's just that this movie does kind of fail, like, trying to have Hans and Sean together, kind of thing, but overall, it's still, like, a very enjoyable, fun movie to watch. For 13, I got SpiderMan Far From Home. This movie was pretty much a pretty good sequel. I mean, I would say it kind of, like, takes place after Endgame and a couple years after it, and I do think that Mysterio is a very intimidating villain. I mean, it's one of the best parts about this movie for sure. I mean, probably one of the better MCU villains. I really like the kind of like whole entrance in here. I mean, I did not like that being like him bringing the scrolls in. This doesn't really make sense story wise in my. I mean, it just kind of doesn't make sense in my opinion. But they do a pretty good job, like, in this whole relationship between Peter and then MJ. I mean, they do a pretty good job with both of them, and just happy, trying to try out a couple of jokes, kind of funny. And times, I don't really like how they got like having a relationship, and it doesn't really work, in my opinion. But overall, this movie is an enjoyable movie to watch. Good action, and so a pretty good MCU movie. Number 12, I got It Chapter 2. This movie is a very good horror movie. I mean, at times it can be scary, despite the fact that these It movies aren't exactly that scary. I mean, that's something kind of like, it's very story-driven. I mean, at times it can be scary, but it's not, like, totally scary, obviously. But, like, overall, like, the story of this movie is just very consistent. I like the whole idea of his real marriage coming back to try and stop Pennywise because he's back on a roll in Terry Main, and it just really works, my opinion, and it is, and it's just this movie does have very good acting even at them, and this movie does have a few editing problems with that. But overall, I do feel like this movie does really work for what it says. It is a very good horror movie with a consistent story and very good characters. Number 11, I got the Lego Movie 2, the second part. This movie is honestly a very fun movie to watch. I mean, it's kind of like weaker than the original thing of it, but I still overall enjoyed it. I mean, I had a lot of fun watching this. I mean, the whole song, song's gonna get stuck inside your head. I mean, obviously kind of meant more of a joke, but it kind of worked, and I do feel like they did a pretty good job with it. And the story does kind of like have problems, a couple of characters, and kind of a couple of story problems, but overall I feel like this movie is pretty enjoyable to watch, as it's just a fun family movie that sends a very good message to young kids. Now we're into the top 10, starting with number 10, Shazam. This movie is a complete game changer for the DCU. I mean, I totally thought they were like down on the ground, but then they made this movie. And it's just a really fun movie that works into comedy, and just the whole action in it. This movie doesn't really work. I don't really like Dr. Sabana. He kind of feels generic, and they do a pretty bad job, kind of like developing the rest of the family besides Billy Batson and his main brother. But the other people of the family don't really do much. But they do overall do a pretty good job with Billy Batson overall, and this movie is really enjoyable to watch, and the action, and it does kind of like a joke time that works, and it is overall a fun movie. Number 9, I got Dr. Sleep. This movie is just very good. I mean, horror movie it's kind of scary. I mean, at times it can be, like, just the whole kind of like scenes where like those guys are like trying to consume this whole, and then when they go back to the Overlook Hotel and try and entrap these people, who are trying to suck up the shining powers from people and killing them. I mean, that whole scene was just a good callback to The Shining, and it's just very scary. I mean, there are times, even if this movie does have a few story and structure problems, it doesn't really feel like it connects at times, and it doesn't really feel like that, and overall, all that doesn't really connect to Shining overall that well. But I still feel like this movie is a very great movie, as for the most part, the story is pretty well done, and the characters is well done, and as well as Danny. There's other kind of broken numbers and works, and just the whole kind of like Shining kind of thing. I mean, they do a good job kind of like showing more about this whole shining power. Coming at number 8, I got Frozen 2. This movie, wow, it's a game changer for sure. I mean, it's another great movie from Disney. It's honestly slightly better than the original. I mean, this whole story of trying to find out what else called her. I mean, she's ended up being like the whole fifth element, which I really like, and the whole development that they do to Elsa and Anna just perfectly works for this movie, and as well as Kristoff, they do a good job kind of developing his character more, and his love on him. I mean, they did a very good job with that, and I really do like how they kind of grew it throughout this movie, and just the whole soundtrack of this movie, each and every song really fits the moment. It's some of the best ones, being like Into the Unknown and Show Yourself, especially those two are its highlights in this movie. Overall, it's just a really fun movie. Number 7, I got Rocket Man. This movie is a very good movie, no doubt about it. I mean, it's just a whole story trying to tell Elton John's life, and I think they showed just enough about it, and I really think execution well done, and each one of the songs that they play are very fun, and I think each time that they kind of like show his life really works out well, and I really like how in depth they kind of go into showing his whole music career and just his whole life during his music career, and I try to like get over his drug addiction. At number 6, I got Toy Story 4. Easily the best animated movie of the year. I mean, they do a very good job creating a consistent story. It's a very emotional ending with Woody and Buzz splitting with each other. I mean, it's a very emotional ending that pretty much defines Woody's character, and they do a good job of like showing more Bo Peep and relationship, and I really like them. And it's the whole opening, and it's Bo Peep being separated from like saying how that explained is just a very emotional way to start it out, and then it's just the whole. I mean, this movie overall really works. Like the whole every single new character, like Forky, Duke Boom, Bunny and Ducky, they're all really good characters in their own rights, and each character just really works for this movie, despite the fact that some of the old characters are kind of sidelined, which I can dislike, and this movie overall is just an amazing movie, and it's probably easily the best animated movie of the year. Number 5, I got Knives Out. This movie is a very good murder mystery. I mean, it's the whole kind of murder mystery and trying to figure out this whole mystery is executed well. Daniel Craig did a great job in his role as Detective Blanc, and that there's the whole way it's each act they try and solve the case really work out well, even if at times they kind of give away too many hints at this, but they did overall a good job with it, and it did well. This movie does really work, in my opinion. I mean, it's just that they create a consistent story and trying to figure out the case, and they overall did a very good job with it. Number 4, I got Avengers Endgame. Just the whole climax of this movie is very good. I mean, it's all taken out of Thanos thing, and I kind of like the whole time travel aspect. I mean, it's a different kind of thing that the MCU brought to it, and it's the first time they really brought in time travel to it, which I'm glad that the MCU is trying something different for once, and I definitely do like the whole kind of this movie. I mean, it's just really a fun movie to watch with all the action, and they did a pretty good job with most of the characters in this movie. Number 3, I got Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Wow, this movie is just like another Tarantino masterpiece. I mean, just the story is very consistent throughout, and I like how this whole story is kind of like a what-if scenario, and I really like that it's also something that really is good for the ending, and Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie all did a great job in their roles, and especially Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt. I feel like they should at least get Oscar nominations for their roles, and overall, they did a great job in it, and this movie overall is just a masterpiece. I mean, everything about it just really works in this, as it just have a very consistent story. Number 2, I got John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum. This movie was just jaw-dropping how good it was. I mean, it's obviously in a masterpiece of a trilogy. I mean, I really adored the first two, but this movie, it's kind of made me drop my jaw. I mean, I didn't really expect it to be better than the original, but it turned out to be better than the original. I mean, it just really works out. I mean, just the whole chase scene, and the amount of tension to it, All the action is very intense. I like the whole execution of the story. John Wick kind of like grows over time as he's being excommunicated. I mean, it's just that this movie just feels so much tension to it, and just the action, some of the best action I've seen this decade for sure, which is why this is definitely one of my favorite movies of all time. Finally, at number 1, I got Joker. This movie was an absolute game changer for the comic book movie genre, and it does something completely new to it. I mean, it creates a realistic tone to it, which is something that makes this movie up with The Dark Knight. It's not as good as The Dark Knight, but it's like up on its same level, in my opinion. It's just that it's such a realistic story that's taken more seriously than just simply just superheroes need to stop the supervillain from taking over the world. I really like how this movie does this one. It creates a bunch of drama in this. In this whole Joker kind of thing. It makes him turn into the Joker and explaining that. I like this whole as an origin story. It's just that the whole line in this movie. It's a comedy. It really works. It's just that this movie is pretty much, it works in every single part of it. It's a complete game changer to the genre, and I really like how Joaquin Phoenix done it, and I definitely really like the whole direction by Todd Phillips at this movie. It's just a game changer to the comic book movie genre. It's definitely in my top 30 favorite movies of all time, if I redid that list now. That was my ranking of every single movie I saw in 2019. So, what was your ranking, or top 10, whatever you want to put in the comments below. Tell me in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.